Hi, it's David Sealey from CACI again, doing a third interview now in our Next Digital Decade series. We were meant to be doing the event on the 1st of April. Braze were going to be one of our key sponsors at the event, and I'm joined today by Gareth Ballard, who is going to speak on the day. Gareth is the VP of Sales for Braze, and really excited to have him with us today. So Gareth, hi. Would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, etc.?
Sure, and good afternoon, David. As you mentioned, I'm VP of Sales for Braze in EMEA. For anyone who doesn't know who Braze are, we're a customer engagement platform. Our goal is to help consumers forge human connections with the brands that they love. And my role at Braze is to look after our commercial activities across the EMEA region.
Okay, great. What was it that made you decide to go to Braze when you kind of moved jobs and joined them?
That's a good question. Why did I join Braze? Fortunately, it's a question I haven't asked myself too many times since I did join about 4 years ago when we were called Boy. I'm certainly glad that we changed the company name in that time. I think it was two reasons really. I don't think you need to be the most forward-thinking industry thought leader to recognize that a lot of people were connecting on mobile devices and other devices. And I think there was very much a gap in the MarTech landscape for tools that would enable customer engagement in the mobile space. As someone who sold MarTech for more years than I will admit in this interview, always found that there are two things that make my life a little easier, and I'm all for making my life easier. One is that the technology is really well placed on the market and actually solves customers' problems. And then secondly, as a result of that, that you have customers that are happy with your solution and willing to talk to other customers about it. And I certainly found that to be the case with Braze and have done since. And there were some really strong people that I'd worked with before that had joined to set up Braze outside of the US, who sold me on the vision, and thankfully they weren't lying to me 4 years later.
Yeah. You mentioned in your answer there that you've been selling MarTech for a while and you know what makes that easy. Obviously, that puts you in a very privileged position in that you've seen a number of changes, and obviously the idea with the Next Digital Decade interview series is to reflect back on what has changed and what may change in the future. And have there been any changes that you've seen and witnessed it in your career that you think have been very transformational for the industry?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this always, we can't get away from the expansion of devices and the number of devices that people can now interact with brands across in very different ways. There's been some technology changes behind that as well in terms of how to react to that, but I can come back to that later. But in terms of consumer behavior, it just comes back to that device piece. And to give an example of how we all use technology differently in a personal way, I always think about alarm clocks and alarm calls. I'm not sure if anyone sells alarm clocks anymore, but if I look at my household, my son sets his alarm via Alexa.
Yeah.
I set mine using my iPhone. My wife uses her Apple Watch. My youngest doesn't need one because he's up at 6 no matter what. Although I did find out that he'd pre-booked alarm calls via Alexa for his birthday and Christmas, just to make sure that he's up at 4 a.m. on those 2 days. So a simple task like that being done across multiple different devices, I think, is a good way of describing how personally we use technology in a different way. And then I think with those increased devices, be it home assistants, smartwatches, mobile phones, and whatever the connected devices will be going forward. More devices, more interactions means more data at brands' disposal, and therefore, more opportunities to use that data in a meaningful way to listen to a customer, to understand what they're doing, and then to create great messaging experiences and in relevant, personalized way.
Have there been any trends that you've seen in marketing technology that haven't delivered, that things that were promised, that marketers got very excited about, that then haven't come to fruition?
Yeah, I think, and it's a good question, David. I think if continuing the theme of consumers having much more option in how they interact with brands and the devices they can do that on, and the data available, it's much harder for brands to get their hands around and to be able to use that in a meaningful and contextual way. So I think one of the things that I've seen consistently with our customers fail to deliver is the concept that one tool, you buy one tool from a vendor that does a bit of everything, and that's going to be able to create great customer experience. I always think of it a bit like a Swiss Army knife, which has lots of great little bits on it, but it's very difficult trying to eat your dinner with one. And so I think we've seen, the old ways of doing stuff in this proliferation of devices and data, and the old technologies that once were perfect when, we had a fairly linear conversation with customers across email, have failed to deliver. And so we've seen, the rise of what we might call a sort of a modern tech ecosystem around marketing, which is, a variety of different technologies and best of breed technologies versus that one tool that does everything, that with open APIs and streaming technology, can talk to each other in real time, so that, we can understand what the consumer's doing on the website, in the app, walking past the store. We can listen to that, understand it, and create the right message to create a meaningful experience, and equally to stop sending a message. So I think it's very easy as consumers and recipients of messaging to think in our inbox today or on our phone, some of the messages that we've received, that we probably think, yeah, it would be great if you hadn't sent me that. To share a personal example, I recently had to buy my son some emergency school trousers. Right. And I wouldn't ask why I needed emergency school trousers, but I was buying them from a high street retail brand. I paid for them for next day delivery. Tracking, it said it had been delivered, it hadn't. I spoke to a customer success assistant. They informed me there'd been a mistake at their end, they'd cancel it, but I'd have to go back onto the website. The trousers, none of which was a great customer experience, and would have probably been clear to anyone reading the live chat that I wasn't particularly happy with that customer experience, but wouldn't have stopped me engaging with that brand. But then 30 seconds later, I get a marketing email from them trying to sell me something else, which, frustrated me. I immediately hit unsubscribe. Yeah. So, a good example of when, systems talking to each other can sometimes stop messages going out that are irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely. A challenge for brands to once they've got all this data, then to change marketing and reflect what might be going on for that customer, what's happening in their experience at that moment, rather than just hitting blanket sends on emails or messages out to every customer who's ever purchased with them, which leads to these kind of poor experience moments. Now, we've talked so far about some of the trends you've seen that have been very positive: mobility, the use of voice, but also those trends that haven't really come to fruition, such as being able to buy a one-size-fits-all marketing cloud and then implement that within your organization and have it do everything really well. When you're going out today in the present moment and having conversations with organizations, what changes are CMOs trying to get on board with at the moment? What are they trying to do and deliver for their businesses?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't dream of speaking on behalf of CMOs, but from an observation point of view, I think with that increase in the data and the speed with which data is available and the speed with which data about a consumer becomes out of date, makes it much harder for CMOs to control that conversation and make it a human conversation. And so, if you look at any report around, where CMOs plan to invest, you'll see them leaning towards AI and machine learning to try and find a way to quickly understand what the customer's doing and act in a way that pushes them towards the goals that the CMO wants to achieve. And I think the biggest thing right now clearly is understanding that customer and retaining them. So in the current environment, defending the customer base and retaining people is more important than ever. Interestingly enough, we published a report yesterday on the streaming industry, right, which is one of the industries possibly benefiting from the fact that we're all at home at the moment, and they're seeing subscriptions and downloads absolutely spike as consumers have more time to watch streaming. But the interesting thing then comes with when they've got all these new subscribers and they've got all these customers, how do they maintain them? How do they move them from watching one bit of content to continually using that brand, and using that brand when there are so many more options available? With Disney Plus coming into the market, there are many more different ways that we can consume content. And the report was quite interesting around showing some spikes in surges of people's interest in these streaming platforms, and those platforms that are able to maintain a high daily active usage because they're using data, and they're using data in such a way to create messaging that's based off consumers' action. So it's based on the fact that I've watched episode 3 and they're prompting me to watch episode 4. It's not a blanket message out to everyone saying, hey, there's a new series of Program X coming out. Yeah. And in that report, we talk about the benefits that we're seeing from CMOs and consumers who are using that action-based behavior to ride that curve a bit further from a consumption perspective.
Yeah, and we'll put the link to that report in the blog post so people can get hold of that report. And it's worth calling out Channel 4, who is both a client of CACI and of Braze as well, and the amazing content library they have. And therefore the CRM challenge, the customer communication challenge, is one of getting people connected to the right bit of content for them, that's going to keep them interested, engaged, and keep them watching, really, and letting them know what good content there is that matches their preferences and tastes. You've talked a little bit about Braze as a platform today, and I thought it'd be worth you speaking to, and I know you're very conscious of this not being a sales pitch. This is meant to be an informative session for people who are listening to these interview series, but I thought it'd be worth leaning into what's a good example of someone using the Braze platform, and I know you sent over some slides, so perhaps we can talk to what is a good example and what good looks like.
Yeah, so I think there are lots of great examples out there of brands doing a really good job of this. There are lots of good examples out there, possibly more examples of people not doing a great job of it. Our customer success team at Braze, we have this framework that we call the Braze continuum that hopefully gets our customers from good messaging to great messaging. And the example that I was going to talk about when we were going to be present at the CACI event was some of the great work that Burger King have been doing. And I think Burger King are a great example of a really creative brand who want to engage and excite and interest people, but who have absolutely harnessed technology in such a way that it becomes a canvas for creativity. So there's a fairly famous campaign that they ran last year, the Whopper Detour campaign, which started with, as I think most things do, a really simple idea. And the really simple idea was that McDonald's has more restaurants than Burger King does in the States. So why don't we turn McDonald's restaurants into Burger King? And so they used a variety of different technical sources. They span up a technical modern stack that created an experience whereby when I went within a certain distance of a McDonald's store, had I downloaded the Burger King app, I could become eligible for a coupon, which I could then deep link a map to the nearest Burger King and go and redeem that coupon and buy a Whopper for 1 cent. And it was a fantastic campaign. The statistics are very encouraging. They won multiple awards for it, but just from a stats perspective, it sent them rocketing to #1 in the App Store. Who would have ever thought, a burger app would be above, WhatsApp and Instagram in the App Store.
Yeah.
It drove the biggest store footfall for 5 years. It increased their online sales by 3x, and I think they had a 37-to-1 ROI for the campaign. But I think just beyond that campaign, what it enabled them to do was spin up this tech stack so they could be creative. I understand they actually had the idea for a campaign, or their agency had the idea for a campaign a year before, right, but they didn't have the technology. They didn't have the technology in place to be able to enact on it. But working with engagement companies like Braze, CDPs, deep linking technology, location companies, they span up this stack that enabled them to create that campaign quite quickly, and then to continue to iterate on it. So there've been many campaigns since. One of my favorite ones being the airport delay campaign. So if, as many of us are, or many of us used to be, you're at an airport and were delayed on your flight, you could go into the app, you could put in your flight information, and you could get a free whopper. So real-time data flowing in around, your location. Are you in the airport? Your flight number. Are you actually on that flight? Is it actually delayed? Here's your coupon. So the stack they've got in our place, I think, going back to my point, it allows them a canvas that is able to harness what are a bunch of really, really creative marketeers to create great experiences.
And just to bring this to life a bit, we've got these slides hopefully here. This is an image from the campaign, this whopper detour available here. And I believe that this was part of the kind of through the line campaign the advertising company ran, where they would have signage outside McDonald's and then recommending people download the app to get the offer. Is that correct?
Yeah, and there are some great videos you can some of their ads that you can see where people are actually turning up at McDonald's, the drive-throughs, and trying to order Burger Kings, and it was a great amount of publicity around it, which not only got them this huge amount of downloads, as we were talking about, but now created a communication two-way channel that has enabled them to retain those customers and continue to speak to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have the next slide, just showing the results that you've just talked through a second ago, and how that campaign looked in the app itself, and a quote from Preston Nix there too. So as I understand it, if I had the app and I was near a McDonald's, it would offer me this 1 cent whopper, and then go to Burger King and collect that. Brilliant campaign. And I think Braze, from what I understand of the platform, was uniquely positioned to deliver this because of your ability to stream through real-time data in a way that other platforms can't, and then make decisions on that data and serve a message back to the customer in real time as well. And I'm doing your job for you here, I guess.
Better than I could, David.
I'm sure that's not true.
I think an important part to note, we're just one small part of that stack. We're not that one tool that purport to do everything. Yeah. And so in that example, it relied on a location platform. It relied on a customer data platform to be able to move that data around quickly. It relied on deep linking technologies to be able to deep link the map and provide the coupons. And Braze was the ability to sort of knittle that together. So yeah, one part in that success story, not the whole reason behind the success story, but delighted to be part of it. And the good example of, as I say, someone that's really, really using technology to increase creativity, where historically sometimes technology was a hindrance to that creativity.
Yeah, I liked when you said it was a canvas for creativity. A nice soundbite there. Well done. Just bringing us on to the final question I've been asking the people we've done these interviews with is what advice would you give to a CMO if you were having a conversation with them? What have you learned from all the conversations and meetings you go out to that you would impart as a kind of pearl of wisdom for them to take away?
Yeah, I think listen, whatever brand you're working for, the consumer's now viewing your customer experience through the same lens as they do any other brand in any other vertical. So, You know, you may be a retailer, but you're getting compared to the experience you get via delivery or Netflix from a customer experience through the lens of these devices and others. And so my advice would be, number one, stop thinking about the channel or a campaign. So, you know, the days when it's a Thursday, we send an email on a Thursday are pretty much gone. So rather than start with the channel or the campaign, start thinking about the architecture. So, you know, how can you put together, you know, a data ecosystem that allows you to listen in real time, understand it, and act. And then once that architecture is in place and you have the ability through streaming technologies to be in the moment and create these great relevant experiences. Number two, to think about the high value actions that you want your consumers to do. So rather than start with the channel and I want to do an email, start with, you know, what do we physically want our customers to do? What behavior are we trying to encourage? And that could be to subscribe, to, you know, consume X amount of content. It could be to make a purchase. Think about what the high value actions are, and then start working around what are the customer journeys you could put in place to influence that high value action, and playing around with, we call it the 3 C's, but, you know, the content, the cadence of communication, but also the channel of communication, and iterate on what's going to drive on an individual basis, on a personal basis, me to perform that action, or Dave to perform that action. And then lastly, thinking about the team structure. So, you know, we benefit from working with a lot of, you know, super agile, high growth companies, and it's really interesting to see the way they often structure themselves, not in a way that's IT over here and mobile over here and email over there, but actually structure their teams around those high value customer actions. So it may be that there's a team that are focused on products back in stock, or it may be a team focused on train delays, and there's marketing and engineering sitting alongside each other, solving these problems in a way that creates great customer experience.
Yeah, great bit of advice there, really, to take away. Gareth, thank you very much for going through these answers today with us, and we'll be getting this on our blog and shared on LinkedIn next week, and we'll put in some of the links to the bits and pieces of content you've talked about through the interview. For those who are following this series and getting the emails about it, the next interview we'll be doing is with Ed Sewell, CACI's Director of Data Strategy, and that will be going out throughout Easter. So again, thanks, Gareth. Appreciate you joining us today. Cheers.
David, take care.